Hello all, in today's video I'll be covering Unit 2, which is Alternative Dispute Resolution in India. I'll be covering all the components of this particular chapter. Before starting with this chapter, I'll just try to explain it in an example. The example is mentioned over here. Suppose there are two parties A and B and they enter into an agreement. Okay, so whenever you enter into an agreement between two parties, always terms and conditions are laid down by both the parties. As per this, A has drafted five terms, okay, and out of those five, B agrees only to the first two and disagrees with the last three. So a dispute arises, obviously, because B is only agreeing to the first two terms, but it's not agreeing to the last three. So a dispute arose. So because there is no full agreement on all terms, the matter has to be resolved. So instead of going directly to a court, so instead of you going to a high court or a district court, which usually takes a long time and it involves a high cost, A and B can choose an alternative dispute resolution mechanism. Okay, so ADR, basically both the parties, they appoint a neutral third party who helps to settle a dispute, and if they choose arbitration, the neutral third party is called arbitrator. If they choose mediation, it's called mediator. If they choose conciliation, it's known as conciliator. So the decision given by the arbitrator is legally binding and has the same effect as a court judgment. The purpose of ADR is to provide a faster, less expensive, more convenient way to resolve disputes without going through the lengthy judicial process. So this is just like a small example that I've given you so that you can just like understand what ADR is in an easy way. Now I'm going to begin with the chapter. In this chapter, I've underlined whatever is important, and usually in the exam, this chapter comes as scenario questions. Scenario based questions come. I will be telling all the important points in the chapter. I've underlined it, and I will not be doing the chapter like reading each and everything. I'll just be focusing on the main key points, and I'll try to provide a quality lecture in a short period of time. So, if we start with this chapter first, okay. So every legal system in the world, it is classified into two models. Okay, so you have your adversarial and intercustodial system, and both the system, their main aim or main objective, you can say, is to dispense justice. But the way they dispense justice is different. So their techniques of adjudication and justice delivery mechanism is different, but their aim is justice. Okay, so now we are going to see what each of these system is. So what is an adversarial system? Okay, so adversarial system is a typical system which we usually see in the common law countries. So in this, what happens is that parties in the legal proceeding, they develop their own theory of the case. Means they analyze the case by themselves, and they gather evidence to support their claims. Whatever they have found out, they try to support it with relevant evidences and claims. And the parties, they are assisted by their lawyers also. So the parties, they hire each of them hire their respective lawyers, which eventually assist them. And these lawyers, they take a very active, or you can say a proactive, role in delivering justice to the litigants. So the lawyers, they also help in gathering evidence, and they also participate in cross examination and scrutiny of evidence presented by the other disputing party. So the role of the judge or the decision maker is rather passive, as the judge decides the claim based solely on the evidence and argument presented by the parties and their lawyers. So as you can see, in an adversarial system, it is mostly the what you say, the lawyers, the advocates, they play a very proactive role, they play a very active role, and the judges or the decision makers, they play a passive role, because the judges, they rely solely on the claims or the evidence that are presented by the parties and the lawyers. Okay, so a very easy way to remember this is that the lawyers play a more active role, and the judge, they play a passive role. Okay, so advocate plays a vital role, judge just listens to the arguments and whatever evidence is presented, and he or she makes the decision based on that. Now, intercustodial system is quite naturally the opposite of adversarial system. In an intercustodial system, the judge or the decision maker takes the center stage in dispensing the justice, okay? And the role of the judge or the decision maker is active because he or she determines whatever facts and issues are there in the particular dispute, and the judge or the decision maker also decides the manner in which the evidence is presented before the court. So he or she decides how it should be presented. Should it be oral, or should it be documentary, or should it be a combination of both? It is completely the option of the judge. They can choose whatever way they want to. So the judge then evaluates the evidence presented before him or her and decides upon the legal claim. Okay, so intercustodial system, the judge plays a very important role, a vital role, a active role, and the lawyers play a passive role, you can say. Okay, so this model of adjudication is known as interventionist or investigative model. Because interventionist, because the judge is doing the activity or the role that should have been performed by the lawyer. So it is interventionist. You are interfering. Okay. Furthermore, in such a system, less reliance is placed on cross examination. So, cross examination that is usually done by a lawyer under adversarial system is not done very rarely done under intercustodial system. Okay, so then they have given few examples. So adversarial system, it is followed in common law countries like India, Australia, US, UK, and this intercustodial system, it is usually followed in common law. Sorry, not common law, continental Europe. Okay, Roman law derived countries. Napoleonic code, whichever countries follow this Roman law Napoleonic code, these countries usually follow the intercustodial system. Okay, next we are going to see the advantages and disadvantages of each. So under advantages of adversarial system, we have 2 points. First is the use of cross examination is very effective because you get to know what is the credibility of the witness presented. You get to see the trustworthiness of the witness. Second, the parties are more willing to accept the results when they're given effective control over the process. As you know, in adversarial system, the parties, they gather their own evidence and they gather their own claims also. Okay, so when they are given more control over the case, they are more willing to accept the results. Because see, when you are doing a thing, or you're completing a task by yourself, whatever result or outcome you get out of that task, you're more willing to accept it because you have done it. Whereas if someone else is doing that for you, you might be reluctant to accept the results if it is not setting you off in a good position. So in an adversarial system, the parties are they are very much willing to accept the results because they're given effective control over the process. But where you see advantages, obviously you have disadvantages. So these are the three main disadvantages of adversarial system. First one is cost. Okay, so I'll just explain all three in short points so that it's easy to remember. First talks about cost, second talks about formalities, and third talks about the passive role played by the judges. So what is the first point saying? That the cost of justice system falls upon the parties. Whatever cost is there, it falls upon the parties. They have to bear the expenses. No one is going to you know pay for you or do anything for you. You have to bear the expenses. So this creates an inbuilt discrimination among the parties. So whoever, suppose they are parties with, if their party is with better resources, they are able to access justice by hiring competent lawyers and presenting sophisticated evidence. But if we compare that with parties that do not have these resources or lack these resources, so this is where it creates inbuilt discrimination. Accessibility and affordability to justice are important challenges which is there in this adversarial system, which is one of its main disadvantage: accessibility and affordability. Okay. Second is role of lawyers and procedural formalities. So whatever, like, cross examination or whatever the lawyers do, the scrutiny of evidence, all of this, it takes long time, it takes a lot of time. And this also might result in prolonging the trial, so it leads to delays in several matters, because doing scrutiny of evidence is not as easy as it sounds. To gather evidence takes a long time, to analyze it takes even more time. So this all, it can lead to, longing the trial. Okay, so it might lead to delays. Third is that the judge, they play a less active role. So the judge, they just rely on the evidence, whatever evidence is presented in front of them, they analyze that and take the result, whatever outcome or whatever, what is the conclusion of that case, right? So they don't care about the truth, how that evidence is presented, is it even factually correct, they don't care about that. So the judge are not duty bound to ascertain the truth, they just evaluate the matter based on the evidence what is presented before them. They don't care how that evidence is extracted, they just rely on it blindly and take the decision. So these are the three main disadvantages. Next, we are going to talk about advantages of intercustodial system. This chapter is a little big, but if you study it in parts, then it will become easier. Like day wise, if you study it in parts, like first you do the two models of justice, then you do ADR, mediation, conciliation, then Lok Adalat, Ombudsman, all of this. If you do it in parts, then it will become easier, and it's a very interlinked chapter. Okay, so moving ahead with the advantages. Again, we have two advantages here. First is that the system offers procedural efficiency. Okay, okay, so what disadvantage we saw for adversarial system? That is the advantage for intercustodial system. Okay, so it offers procedural efficiency because the judges play an active role, so it helps to prevent delays and prolonged trials. Everything goes on smoothly, and the trials are not prolonged as well. So procedural efficiency is there over here. Second, the system preserves equality between the parties, because those parties who have better resources, or you can say stronger parties with more resources, and even, even if they hire expert lawyers or they present uh, sophisticated reports, they might not be able to influence the judges. Okay, because judge himself does everything, no issue with which side is stronger party. Judge himself or herself presents the evaluates the issues and facts of the case. So it does not matter if the party is rich, if one party is strong and the other is weak, it does not matter here. Okay, so whatever is the disadvantage in the adversarial system, that is the advantage in intercustodial system. Then obviously we have disadvantages also. First is that in our intercustodial system, the judge steps into the shoe of an investigator. He or she can no longer remain neutral to evaluate the case with an open mind. So the intercustodial system is also known as interventionist or investigative model, right? So as you know, over here the judge is doing everything. He or she is gathering the evidence, whatever facts or the issues that have to be presented. So once you gather all the evidence, etc., etc., you cannot remain neutral, right? Because you will, before even, coming to the conclusion of the case, you will already develop kind of a bias sort of thing. So the judge himself or herself cannot remain neutral to evaluate the case with open mind. So this is one of the disadvantages. And second, there is a lack of incentive structure for judges to involve themselves in proper fact finding. Incentive structure, you can say, like a salary or a fee structure for the judges. So even the judges may not indulge in proper fact finding, maybe corruption is there, etc., what it can happen. So these are the two disadvantages. Okay, now we are going to move on to the main segment of this chapter, which is introduction to alternative dispute resolution. So don't confuse alternative dispute resolution with arbitration. Okay, ADR and arbitration are two different things. Arbitration is a type of ADR. Do not confuse, because several times when they ask the meaning of ADR, several times you tend to write the definition of arbitration and come, because they might sound a bit similar, right? So, and the definitions are not very different as well, but don't mess it up, because then you will be losing direct marks, because ADR is the main heading and arbitration falls under it. So if you reverse the meaning of it, it will not end up in the correct meaning. So okay, now starting with ADR. So first we'll see the meaning of ADR. The first paragraph is the most important. The following are just the history of ADR, which is not as important. It's rarely asked in exams. If you ask about if it comes in exam, it's not asked, but the definition surely it can come as a three marker. It can come in parts, like as a three marker, they can be, you can be given two parts. Among that, they can ask you the definition of ADR, and then the second part can be a case study. It doesn't come directly as a three marker, obviously, but yeah, it can come. So alternative dispute resolution, it is an attempt to devise a machinery which should be capable of providing an alternative to the conventional methods of resolving dispute in the court system. ADR refers to use of non-adversarial techniques of adjudication of legal disputes. Okay, this definition should be like, something which is learned by heart. You cannot alter words in it, you cannot skip words in it, it has to come as it is. So see, it is an attempt to devise a machinery, means you're trying to modify something that was already existing, or something which wasn't there and you're bringing it, right? Something new that you're bringing, or you're modifying something. So this ADR, it should be capable of providing an alternative to your traditional codes. Whatever traditional code system is there, they should be the alternative to this. So that alternative is called as ADR. ADR refers to use of non-adversarial technique of adjudication. Okay, they don't follow the traditional methods of settling disputes. Okay, ADR is very distinct from the conventional courts, and that you will see later on in the chapter, where we'll see benefits of ADR and how it works. So if you talk about history of ADR, so I've just cut short this paragraph over here for easier understanding. So before the British courts introduced the modern court system in India, people already used simple and traditional methods of settling dispute without going to court, and this was known as ADR. Then later on, when the British came, they brought a formal legal system like modern courts, etc., with based on English law, with proper courts and uniform rules. However, even before this, the Indian legal system had its own local and community based ways of resolving conflicts, which were early forms of ADR. So they have just explained you that even before Britishers came, India had already developed their, they were already using simple and traditional method of settling dispute without going to court. So early forms of ADR, you can call it as that. So we have three types of specialized tribunals. Okay, and you can call this as ADR, early forms of ADR. So you have Kula, which is for disputes of family, community, tribe, caste, race. Then you have Sherni for business related disputes, and Puga are basically for disputes relating to traders and commerce branches. Okay, this can come as a MCQ. They don't really, they ask this in like a three or a two marker. Okay, so okay, next, okay, this is an important paragraph over here. So previously, ADR was considered as a voluntary action on the part of the parties. If you want to choose, you can choose. It's voluntary. Okay, but now it has obtained statutory recognition. Statutory recognition means it has been declared legal by the law with the enactment of Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. So now it has obtained a legal right. Okay, before it was voluntary. Now it is legal, legally binding. Okay, so the enactment of Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 and Legal Service Authority Act 1987. Incorporation of ADR mechanism under Section 89 of Code of Civil Procedure 1908 was one radical step taken by legislature for promoting ADR. So the ADR, whatever ADR mechanisms were there, they were incorporated, means they were included under section 89 of Code of Civil Procedure. And this was done by the legislature of India to promote ADR in India. Okay, because obviously they wanted that people should use this ADR. Why they should use this is what we are going to see just after this. Okay. So, what is Section 89 of CPC? Usually, it is known as, in short, if you say, it is known as settlement of disputes outside the court. So, where it appears to the court that there exist elements of settlement, okay, which may be acceptable to the parties, the court shall formulate the terms of settlement and give them to the parties for observation. And after receiving observation of parties, the court may reformulate the terms of possible settlement and refer the same for arbitration, conciliation, judicial settlement, including settlement through Lok Adalat, and mediation. Okay, suppose dispute has dispute happened between two parties. Okay, now the court is reviewing the case and they find that there exist elements of settlement which is acceptable to parties. They feel that the parties might be willing to they might be willing to opt for any form of ADR. The court will formulate the terms of settlement and they'll give it to the parties. Okay, in that settlement it will be written that, you know, there'll be a full settlement form wherein it will be mentioned to the parties that are you willing to settle your dispute from any of these. Okay, so it is given to the parties and the parties will then read it, they will observe it, and then after the court receives the observations from the party, the court will reformulate the terms of possible settlement. The party has said, okay, we agree for ADR. Then the court will reformulate those terms and will refer it to these. All these are nothing but the types of ADR: arbitration, conciliation, Lok Adalat, mediation. They are types of ADR. Okay, and if the parties say no, we don't want to choose ADR, then they continue with the normal court proceedings. Okay, so the purpose of the section, so what was the purpose of section 89? It was basically to enable the courts to legally refer matters to ADR. Previously there was no mechanism like that. Like, only if the parties go to ADR voluntarily, they go to ADR, okay, done. But if you come to court had no option previously that they can refer you to ADR if they feel that this case can be resolved by ADR. There was no, there was no provision like that. But later on, after the statutory recognition, the courts could refer the matters to ADR, so they could dispose of the case in a very quick manner. It was less time consuming and this helped to reduce the backlog. So this was the advantage that I was talking to you about, that ADR helps to resolve the case in a very efficient and effective manner, and it also helps to reduce the backlog that is already there in the traditional courts. Okay, next, we are going to see the four types of problem faced by courts. So, the law courts are confronted with the following problems. Okay, first problem is lack of number of courts and judges, which creates an inadequacy within justice delivery system. Okay, lack of number of courts and judges. Second is increasing litigation in India due to increasing population. Okay, so since the population in India is increasing, so the litigation, means the cases that are there, they are also increasing, and complexity of laws is there. Okay, the laws are getting complex with each passing day, and their obsolete continuation of some pre-existing legal statutes are there. Obsolete continuation means some laws are such that are not required in the modern era. Obsolete continuation basically is those laws that are, from the old times, and you don't really need it now, but they are still being followed. So this is like, it's something which is inadequate. Then third is basically increasing court fees. Apart from court fees, see, when you think of court fees as it is, you might think, okay, I just have to pay the lawyer. But apart from that, there are a lot of different court fees that are there. You have the incidental fees, everything. You have so many different types of fees. So increasing costs of litigation is also there. Okay, Then fourth, last one is delay in disposal of cases resulting in huge pendency in all the courts. This was one of the problem that was faced by court that was being resolved by ADR, which is delay in disposal of cases, which eventually leads to huge pendency in all the courts. Okay, so, if a question comes, what are the problems confronted by the law courts in India? How can ADR help in resolving these problems? You have to write all these four problems, and then you can write about ADR, how it can help to, how it can help to resolve these problems in a single line. You can write it like I've written here. ADR techniques, they are speedier, they're informal, and they're cheaper mode of dispensing justice when you compare it to conventional judicial procedure. Same line over here, same line is written over here. So once you read it properly, you will automatically start framing answers in your mind, and you will be able to answer the questions properly. Okay, so benefits of ADR. Okay, now we are going to the benefits of ADR, then we will start talking about the different types of ADR. Okay, so benefits of ADR. ADR, as I already told you, it is speedier, it is informal, and it is cheaper mode of dispensing justice. Whenever someone asks you about ADR, these three words should always strike in your mind: speed, informal, cheap. Speedier, informal, cheaper mode of dispensing justice as compared to the conventional judicial procedure. So total you have seven benefits of ADR. So starting off with the first one, it is less time consuming. See, I have highlighted the main points. After that, you can frame it yourself. It's not hard at all. Once you know the points, it is easy. It is less time consuming. Then you can write it is less time consuming as compared to courts. That's it. It is less time consuming. Secondly, it is less costly than litigation. Third, it is free from technicalities of courts. It is informal. Okay. Fourth is that ADR can be used. Okay, so it can be used anytime, even when case is pending before the court of law. Even if your case is pending before the court of law, the court can refer that case to ADR. Okay, and yeah, so it can be used at any time. It's not necessary that if you have already started your case in a traditional court, you cannot, switch back to ADR or go to ADR. No, even if your case is pending, you can switch to ADR. Then fifth one, it is a convenient forum for parties, because the parties, you as parties, you can choose the time, place, and procedure for conducting the preferred dispute redressal process. So as I told you, according to types of ADR, you can choose which type you want to choose. You can choose which time you want to do it, what place you want to do it. So it is convenient forum. You choose everything according to your willingness, according to what what is comfortable to you. All right. The sixth and the seventh point, they are quite similar. Okay. In what ways? That is what we are going to see. Sixth point is, if the dispute is technical in nature, means technical in the sense like if it is connected with a specific topic, a specific subject. If it is technical, then the parties have opportunity to select the expert who possess the relevant legal and technical expertise. Okay, not necessary. If it is related, if you're the dispute is related to something related to engineering or something like that, obviously the lawyer you hire will not have information, knowledge, or experience regarding that particular subject, right? So in that case, the parties even have the opportunity to select a particular expert who can resolve that dispute. So this is one of the main plus points in ADR, which we don't get to see in conventional courts. In conventional courts, you don't have the option to hire a engineer or someone or a expert who can help you resolve the dispute, right? So same way, the seventh point is also the same. I've given a brief of that over here. If the cases are technical in nature, the parties can call experts to settle the cases. So ADR, it is quite flexible in nature. They can refer the cases even to engineers rather than lawyers. This is what I was telling you. If the case is related to construction sites, you can also consult the engineers rather than lawyers. The person who is connected to the case will have more direct participation rather than traditional cases. In traditional cases, even if there is a dispute regarding construction sites, only the lawyers can resolve it. The lawyers will not be having that much direct participation or information or experience regarding the case, right? But obviously engineers will have more information, and they will be more aware about their subject, which is construction sites over here. So when the person connected to the case will have more direct participation rather than that of traditional cases. So when this is done, people feel more satisfied with the outcome. So when this process is done, people feel way more satisfied with whatever outcome is achieved. So, in the light of the apparent need and benefit provided by ADR, it has emerged as a successful alternative to court trial. So, ADR was not a failure, it was successful, and the rise of ADR movement in India indicates that it is contributing tremendously towards reviving litigants' faith in justice delivery mechanism. So, recently also, if you see, ADR is something that is being followed. People refer cases to ADR. So obviously by all this, you can frame a conclusion that ADR has been successful and people are using it. If people are using it, it means that it is somewhere or the other, it is being helpful, and it is helpful in reviving the litigants faith towards whatever justice delivery mechanism is. Okay, next we are going to see what are the types of ADR. This is where the real chapter begins from. Okay, so starting off with the first type of area, which is arbitration. So, arbitration is basically the law which is relating to arbitration. It is contained in the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, and this it came into force on 25th of January 1996. And before this also we had one arbitration act which was implemented in the year 1940, but this current 1996 act, it goes way beyond the scope of the arbitration act 1940, means it has a wider scope. Okay, and arbitration, it provides for domestic arbitration, international commercial arbitration, and also enforcement of foreign arbitral awards. So later on you will see the different types of arbitration. Over there you will be seeing about domestic, foreign, statutory, institutional, all of this you will be seeing over there, international commercial. Okay, so the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996, it is a relevant legislation that governs the process of arbitration in India. So, okay, the statute provides for an elaborate codified recognition of the concept of arbitration. Okay, so I've written it over here. The law properly accepts and explains arbitration in a detailed way, and this has been influenced by changes and improvements in how the court and disputes are handled all over the world. So, whatever this Arbitration Conciliation Act of 1996 that is implemented in India, it properly explains arbitration. It accepts arbitration as a form of ADR, and it keeps on changing as per whatever statutes or whatever laws are there all around the world, and it is a very sophisticated form of dispute resolution. So, in this regard, a special reference has to be made to an international convention entitled the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. Okay, so they had taken out this modern law and international commercial arbitration in 1985. So after the birth of this international treaty, the United Nations General Assembly recommended that all the countries have to give due consideration to the said model law. This model law, all the countries should follow it. Okay, in order to bring uniformity in law and practice of international arbitration. So the United Nations General Assembly, they recommended that all countries should implement this. So the Indian Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996, it has taken references from this United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. Okay, it has followed this international treaty. Okay, now we are going to see what is the meaning of arbitration, what is the definition. This is what I was telling you. If they ask you the definition of ADR, you're going to write what we have already seen. And if they ask you to write the definition of arbitration, this is what you will be writing. Don't mix it up, don't confuse it, don't write the definition of ADR if they ask you definition of arbitration. Okay, this is what I've written over here because a lot of people make mistake in this area. So, arbitration is a term derived from the nomenclature of Roman law. Arbitration is a private arrangement of taking disputes in a less adversarial, less formal, and more flexible forum, and abiding by the judgment of the selected person instead of carrying it to established court of justice. Okay, so arbitration, it basically means solving disputes privately by going to a less formal, more flexible place instead of a court where both parties agree to follow the decision of the chosen person who is known as the arbitrator. Okay, this is the main definition of arbitration. Now we are going to see the process of arbitration. Okay, in the process you are having mainly six steps. Along with that, you have one the setting aside of arbitration arbitral award, which is a very important question. This itself can come as a three marker standalone, so it is a very important topic. If they ask you the process of arbitration, it is usually recommended that you include setting aside of arbitral award along with it so that you don't lose any marks. Okay, process of arbitration. The first step is notice. Okay, so the party aggrieved will send a notice to the defaulting party initiating arbitration. जिस पार्टी के साथ बुरा हुआ है, that party will send the notice to the party who has done the wrong with the other party, and by sending this notice it initiates arbitration. This is how arbitration starts. Okay, second step is to choose a arbitrator. Okay, so the parties in arbitration, they have a freedom to select a qualified expert which is known as arbitrator. Okay, so the whatever like what you say as a neutral third party over here, that is a arbitrator, it is known as arbitrator. So to choose a arbitrator, it can be done in two ways. One, you have arbitration agreement, and one, you have court referral to arbitration. This particular process of arbitration, I will explain you in a very detailed manner, like properly. I will not do it quickly because this usually comes in the exam as a 5 marker. So it is a very, very important question if you talk about from this chapter's point of view. So I will explain you every point in a defined manner. First is arbitration agreement. An arbitration whereby parties agree to submit their present or future dispute or differences to arbitration. It may be in writing or via other means of communication. So beforehand only the parties agree that in future if any disputes or any differences arise, they will resolve it by arbitration. This is known as arbitration agreement. Ki in future if we have any disputes A and B, beforehand only decide that in future if we have any disputes or any differences, we will resolve it using arbitration. This is known as arbitration agreement. Okay. Second is court referral to arbitration. Understand this properly. If a party to a dispute approaches the court despite the presence of arbitration agreement, the other party can raise a claim before the court. The court then refers the dispute back to arbitration if it has been previously agreed by the parties. This method of initiating arbitration is known as court referral to arbitration. Okay. Okay, I'll explain you with a very simple example because it might sound confusing. Suppose there are two parties A and B. Okay, A and B beforehand only they have decided that in future any dispute arises, we will resolve it through arbitration. Now, suppose in future dispute arose. A, instead of going to arbitration, A has gone to the court, but they already have a arbitration agreement, right? Because beforehand only they decided that if any dispute happens, we will resolve it through arbitration. So they're already having arbitration agreement. Despite that, A went to the court. So the other party, which is B, raises a claim before the court. The other party B says that B will say that, judge, We already have an arbitration agreement. So how is A going to the court to resolve the dispute? Then the court will see, do they have an arbitration agreement? When the court finds out yes, they already have an arbitration agreement beforehand, the court refers the dispute back to the arbitration. Okay, if it has already been agreed by the parties that we will resolve the dispute to arbitration, then later on they cannot switch that, okay, we'll go to the court. Okay, so this method of initiating arbitration is known as court referral to arbitration. Court has referred you to arbitration. Okay, I hope you understood these two methods to choose an arbitrator. Okay. Step 3 is statement of claim. So, whatever initial documents, like the first hand documents that are filed by the claimant, okay, claimant is the person who starts the case. So, whatever initial documents are filed by the claimant, which lists the issues raised to be resolved in the arbitration. This is statement of claim. All the issues that are there that should be solved through arbitration, that is mentioned in a document, that is known as statement of claim, which is filed by the claimant. Statement of counterclaim is the respondent's reply to the claim presented by claimant. Whatever document has been filed by the claimant, the respondent, whatever reply the respondent does to that is known as statement of counterclaim. Respondent's reply. Statement of claim, initial documents. Statement of counterclaim is basically respondent's reply to the claim. Fifth step is proceeding. So, as I already told you in benefit of ADR, that in ADR the parties can choose the place, time, whenever they want to meet. Okay, so step 5, the proceedings start. So the parties decide the place and time to meet. The process of dispute resolution through arbitration is confidential. We have already seen it in the definition. Arbitration is a private forum. So arbitration, it is confidential, unlike court proceeding which are open to public. Of course, in a court, even now if you go and see, court proceedings are open to general public. Anyone can enter, anyone can view the case. It is not closed, it is not done in a confidential manner or in a private manner. It is open to general public. So this particular feature, which is the feature of private forum, this feature of arbitration is popular for commercial disputes. Okay, because what happens in commercial disputes, whatever secrets are there of business or commercial enterprises, these are revealed during process of dispute resolution. But if this dispute resolution is done through ADR, all these secrets that are revealed, they are protected and preserved because arbitration is confidential. Okay, so this is one of the features which makes arbitration very popular. Okay, so companies can maintain their commercial reputation because they can prevent the general public or the customers from discovering the details of the ongoing legal disputes. So this is in proceedings, you just have to write how arbitration is confidential, and the conventional court proceedings, they're open to the public. Then how it is popular in commercial disputes, then just write a few points, main points about it, that whatever secrets that are revealed, they get protected and preserved, all of this. Okay, so it helps to maintain commercial reputation. And the last step is award, which is the most important step. Okay, obviously after the decision is taken, okay, usually in a court, if in a conventional traditional court, whatever decision is taken by the judge, it's taken. Okay, judge announces the decision. But in arbitration, that decision is known as award. That is the difference. Okay, so the decision which is rendered by the arbitrator, as I already told you, arbitrator is the neutral third party. That decision that is taken by the arbitrator is known as arbitral award. Okay, so it is similar to a judgment given by judge. The arbitral award is binding on the disputing parties. Okay, so arbitral award is having the similar effect of that of a court judgment. Okay, it is similar, binding is there. Once a arbitral award is rendered, it is recognized and enforced akin to a court pronounced judgment. Okay, so after arbitral award is rendered, conclusion has been done, it is recognized and enforced similar to a court order. Okay, it has the same to same value of that of a court order. Okay, so in addition to arbitral award, the arbitrator also holds power of to grant interim measures like the judge of the court. this falls under section 29, right? In term measures, section 29. So the arbitrator also has the power and authority to basically to grant interim measures, and interim measures similar to that of a judge in the court. So interim measures, basically they are the temporary measures that are given. Okay, it comes under Section 9 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. Okay, interim measures, not 29, 9. Okay, so interim measures, okay, they're temporary relief that are granted while the legal proceedings are ongoing. Okay, suppose the case is regarding a property. So, in between, the arbitrator announces temporary measures so that you cannot sell the property or something because dispute is ongoing, right? So, in between measures that are taken. Okay, so arbitral award holds several similarities with the court order or a judgment. Okay, now this is one distinct point which is not there in arbitration. Okay, so the main difference between an arbitral award and a usual court proceeding is the okay. So the arbitral award, it does not hold any precedential value. It means that in future, see, in a normal conventional court, if there is similar case in future, they can refer the previous decision taken. But in arbitration, they cannot refer previous case in future cases. In future, if a similar case has occurred, they cannot refer to a previous case of a similar kind. This is the only distinction between arbitration and a conventional court proceeding. Okay. So, okay, now the main thing that I was telling you, which is setting aside of arbitral award. So, an arbitral award, it can be cancelled by a court only in certain specific situations. First, if a party was not legally capable of entering into an arbitration agreement. Okay, now, in our textbook, they have not clearly specified what legally capable means over here, but you just understand if the parties are not legally capable, the court can cancel the arbitration. Second, if the arbitrator was not properly appointed, according to the particular case, the arbitrator was not properly appointed. If the award deals with matters outside the arbitration agreement. Fourth, if the arbitrator was biased or unfair. Fifth, if the award goes against public policies. Okay. If the arbitral award, the outcome that is rendered, it goes against public policy, it can be cancelled by the court. So under these five situations, the arbitral award which is rendered, it can be cancelled by the court. Okay, now we are going to talk about the types of arbitration which I was telling you in the starting of this where we were reading about uh, how arbitration was enacted, Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996, how it has a wider scope than its predecessor, which was Arbitration Act 1940. Then we are talking about the types of arbitration. So we have these six types of arbitration. So first, we have domestic, then you have foreign, then you have ad hoc, institutional, statutory, international, commercial. So, okay, domestic arbitration, the arbitration in which arbitral proceedings are held in India, all the arbitral proceedings they are held inside India, and the two parties also to the dispute, they also belong to India. So, see, just remember, when everything is being done in India, the proceedings and the parties, all of them, they belong in India, it is known as domestic arbitration. Okay, and the dispute, it is settled according to the substantive and procedural laws of India, then that is known as domestic arbitration. Foreign arbitration, an arbitration wherein the arbitral proceedings are conducted in a place outside India, but the arbitral award that is there, that has to be enforced in India. Okay, so wherever you see that the parties, the proceeding, the arbitral proceedings are happening outside India, but the arbitral award has to be rendered inside India, that is known as foreign arbitration. Okay, now ad hoc arbitration and institutional arbitration are somewhat similar. In ad hoc arbitration, institution is not there. The arbitration, which is governed by parties themselves without recourse to a formal arbitral institution. Okay, there is no formal institution. The parties themselves govern it. Okay, and they are free to set their own rules. Okay, so this ad hoc arbitration, it can be domestic or international, and the ad hoc arbitration basically means the arbitration is not conducted according to the rules of the arbitral institution, because there is no institution under this. So the parties do not have obligation to submit their arbitration to the rules of arbitral institution, because there is no arbitration institution. Okay, so the parties, they can set their own rules. Okay, rules of procedure. Institutional arbitration is the opposite. Okay, in this, the arbitration, it is a type of arbitration where the parties, they have to select a particular institution, which in turn takes the arbitration forward by selecting an appropriate arbitrator, and they lay down the whatever rules that are applicable within an arbitration. Okay, so example of institutional arbitration, you have the London Chamber of International Arbitration, which has its offices across the world, including New Delhi in India. Okay. Then you have the fifth type, which is statutory arbitration. Instead of reading this, I've given you a short may over here. So, statutory arbitration, it is a compulsory form of arbitration that is required under a law made by the parliament or state legislature. In this type, parties do not have the choice or need not give consent, because the law itself makes arbitration mandatory for certain disputes. See, for certain disputes, arbitration is mandatory, means you cannot, like, no chance you go to the court, you have to solve it through arbitration. Okay, so the parties do not have the choice, nor they have to give consent. Consent is given there where you have freedom of choice, but here you have to, it's compulsory. So, for example, Defense of India Act 1971. Any dispute which is arising under this Defense of India Act 1971 has to be resolved by statutory arbitration. This is just one example. Defense of India Act 1971 is just one example. Okay, don't think that this is the only type of dispute, with only disputes under this has to be resolved through statutory arbitration. No, this is one type of example. Okay, so the parties are legally bound to follow this process as per the statute. Statute means law, as per the law, whether they agree or not. There is no yes or no. You have to follow it. Okay. Then last may you have international commercial arbitration. So over here, at least arbitration in which at least one of the disputing parties is in a place outside India other than India. Arbitration with government of foreign country is considered as international commercial arbitration, and it has been defined under section 2 clause 1 clause F of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. So at least one of the parties is in a country other than India. Okay, this is international commercial arbitration. Okay, and okay, so these are the six main types of arbitration that you have. Next, we are going to see a very interesting case law, which is Balco versus Kesar. Okay, Balco stands for Bharat Aluminium Company Limited versus Kesar Aluminium Technical Service Incorporation. Okay, so what happened in this case law? In this, basically, you don't have to like really learn everything like point by point. You just need to know about C10 venues. Few important points is there. So Balco and Kesar, they made a contract in 1993 where Kesar had to install a computer system in for Balco. Their contract said disputes would be solved by arbitration in London under English arbitration law, but the main contract law was Indian. Okay, a dispute happened. Okay, in the future, a dispute happened, and the arbitration was done in London. The award was given there, but Balco tried to challenge it in the Indian court. Okay, Balco tried to challenge it in the Indian court under Section 34. Though it had to be resolved under arbitration of London, Balco tried to challenge it in Indian courts. So during arbitration, Balco asked the Indian courts for interim measure, which comes under Section 9, as I have already told you, to stop the encashment of bank guarantees. Okay, lower court gave mixed decisions, so the case finally went to Supreme Court to decide whether Indian court can interfere in foreign seated arbitration, because their contract, whatever contract Kesar and Balco had, According to the contract, the disputes had to be solved by arbitration in London. But Balco had challenged this in Indian courts. So the Supreme Court had to decide whether Indian courts can interfere in foreign seated arbitration or not. So this is where you have the distinction between seat and venue, okay, which is quite crucial in the event. The arbitration agreement designates a foreign country as a seat or a place of the arbitration, and also selects the act as a curial law governing. Okay, so it is therefore follow that if a arbitration agreement is found or held to provide for a seat or place of arbitration outside India, then even if the contract specifies that the act shall govern the arbitral proceeding. Okay, part 1 of the act would not be applicable, meaning that if your seat is in London, like in this case it is in London, they cannot grant interim measures in India. Balco cannot challenge the case in the Indian courts. Okay, so if you just read about this over here, like if you just so Indian courts do not have power to grant interim measures when the seat of arbitration is outside India. This is what I am telling you. The seat in this case was London. So Indian courts do not have the power to grant interim measures. But later on this was changed, and Indian courts, they are now able to grant interim measures. Okay, later on, see over here, it it might be written over here in 2015 amendment. The shortcomings in Balco versus shortcomings means like some things that were not resolved during the case. It was laid down the provision for interim measures by the court is even applicable to foreign seated arbitration. Balco versus Kesa case, it was determined that if the seat is out in a place, seat of arbitration is outside India, the Indian courts do not have power to grant interim measures. But later on in this 2015 Amendment Act, the uh, it provided for interim measures, interim relief by the court, even to the foreign seated arbitration. So, this was what was the conclusion. So, if they ask you about Balco versus Kesa, you can just write a brief summary of what this case was. Mainly, this part is important, and that conclusion you can write. Okay, then next you have two case laws. Okay, first one is Konkan Railways Corporation Limited versus Mayhul Construction Company, and second is Furious Day Lawson Limited versus General Exports Limited. Okay, so Konkan Railway Corporation. Okay, so this okay, over here it is nothing like, it's nothing very difficult or very, it might look difficult because they have given it as a concrete single para, but if you break it down, it is a simple thing only that we've already seen over here. Okay, so, Honorable Supreme Court has emphasized increasing growth of global trade, etc. So, delay of disposal of cases in courts under the normal system, under the conventional judicial system. We have already seen in the problems faced by court that there is a delay in disposal of case, prolonged trials is there, etc. Right? So, it made it imperative to have a perception of ADR, more particularly in matter of commercial disputes. It made it imperative means it made it important that we kind of follow or we adopt ADR, especially in matters that relate to commercial disputes, because commercial disputes are something that have to be resolved quickly. You cannot keep the case lingering on for like 6 or 10 years or more than that, right? So that is what they talk over here, that how ADR was incorporated, and then the unilateral model law that we already saw in 1985, how the General Assembly had actually motivated that all the countries should follow this, so that there's a uniformity. That is what we talk about here. Then how the Arbitration Conciliation Act of 1996 was enacted in India, and what all it included within its scope. It is not only for domestic arbitration, it includes foreign arbitration, international commercial arbitration. Basically, a summary of what we have read till now. Okay, Furious Day Lawson versus General Export Limited is basically, they talk about the benefits of ADR here. That ADR Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996, it provides speedy and alternative solution. Okay, arbitration. Not Yeah, so they basically talk about benefits of ADR, that it provides speedy and alternative solution, it is cheaper, and it avoids the lengthy process of litigation. So these are the two case laws that they have given here. Okay, now we are going on a second type of ADR, which is mediation. Okay, so what is mediation? Mediation is a method of ADR in which parties appoint a neutral third party who facilitates the mediation process in order to assist the parties in achieving an acceptable voluntary agreement. Okay, mediation is premised on voluntary will of the parties. This is one word that you always have to write if your question, or if in a question it's given as a case or anything and the answer to that is mediation, you have to explain mediation. You always have to include this word voluntary will of the parties. Okay, it is not forceful, it is on the voluntary will of the parties. In mediation, the parties appoint a neutral third party who is known as the mediator. Okay, and the mediator or the mediation process, it basically helps to assist the parties to achieve a acceptable voluntary agreement. Okay, and it is based on the voluntary will of the parties. It is flexible, informal, same as arbitration, flexible, informal technique of dispute resolution. So mediation is more formal than negotiation. Obviously, it is more formal than negotiation, but it is less formal than arbitration or litigation. This is one difference between mediation and arbitration, that it is a bit less formal than arbitration or litigation. Unlike litigation and similar to arbitration, mediation is relatively inexpensive, fast, and confidential. So, this is similarity, this is difference. How is mediation different from arbitration? It is less formal. How is it similar? Because it is relatively inexpensive, it is fast, and it is confidential, means it is done in a private forum. Further, one more difference is there between mediation and arbitration. They differ on the grounds of the nature of award rendered. The outcome of mediation does not have similar binding like a arbitral award. As we saw in step 6 of process of arbitration, the arbitral award that is being rendered by the arbitrator, it has a similar binding as that of a court judgment. But in mediation, it does not have a similar binding like that of a arbitral award. Okay, so this is the two differences and one similarity that is there between mediation and arbitration. Now we have different types of mediation. You have five types of mediation. So you have evaluative, facilitative, transformative, mediation with arbitration, and online mediation, which is the easiest. Okay, so, what is first one? What is evaluative mediation? Evaluative mediation, you're evaluating that particular case. Remember it like that. Evaluating. Okay, evaluative mediation is focused on providing parties with the evaluation of their case and directing them towards settlement during an evaluative mediation process. When parties agree that the mediator should do so, the mediator will express a view on what might be a fair or reasonable settlement. Evaluative mediator is somewhat an advisory role in that he or she evaluates the strength and weakness of each side of the argument. So you just remember that evaluative, basically the mediator is focused on providing the parties with the evaluation of their case. They evaluate the case and they eventually direct towards them, towards settlement, towards a conclusion, towards the outcome. Okay, so during this process, the parties agree that mediator should do so. Okay, the parties agree that mediator should do this role. A mediator expresses that what should be a fair settlement, what should be done so that a fair settlement could be achieved, a fair outcome can be achieved. And it's basically a mediator has that advisory role. The evaluative mediator has a somewhat advisory role in which he or she evaluates the strength and weaknesses of each side's argument. What is A's strength and weakness, what is B's strength and weakness, right? And the mediator also makes predictions about what would happen if they go to the court. This is evaluative mediation. Then you have facilitative mediation. This I will explain you with the example also. First, let us see what it means. Okay, facilitative mediation. Facilitative mediators typically do not evaluate a case or direct the parties to particular settlement. This is the difference between facilitative and evaluative. In evaluative, the mediator is basically evaluating the case and they're directing the parties to a particular settlement. But in facilitative mediation, they are not doing that. Okay, instead, the facilitative mediator facilitates the conversation. Okay, they have to facilitate conversation between the parties. These mediators act as guardian of the process, not the content or the outcome. So they are not concerned with what is the conclusion or what is the outcome of the entire process. They are just concerned as the guardians of the process. During facilitative mediation session, the parties in the dispute control both what will be discussed and how the disputes are resolved. Unlike transformative mediator, facilitative mediation is focused on helping parties find a resolution to their dispute. Okay, and facilitative mediator, they provide a structure and agenda for the discussion. What should be the structure? What is the agenda of the discussion? Basically, it they help to initiate conversation. Okay, so this is the difference between facilitative evaluative. Okay. Now, as I told you, I'll give you example. So in the exam, it has come that you okay. So there were two scenarios that were given, and they asked you to identify the type of mediation in each scenario and state how each of the type is suited to the specific situation. So the first one was that there are two business partners, Mr. X and Mr. Y. They are involved in a conflict over the management of their joint venture. Both parties are willing to preserve their relation, but they are struggling to communicate efficiently or effectively. They decide to approach a mediator who facilitates their discussions, helping them understand each other's perspectives and guiding them towards a mutually beneficial solution. So in this, if you see, they have given you quite a few clue words with which you can identify. First was struggling to communicate effectively. This was one clue. Second clue was that mediator who facilitates their discussion. This is second clue. Third clue is basically guiding them towards a mutually beneficial solution. So as I told you, facilitative mediation facilitates conversation. Then second clue was facilitating their discussion. Again, here only facilitates. And then last one was guiding them towards a mutually beneficial solution. Okay, understand each other's perspective and guiding them. So here it's written, they provided structure and agenda for the discussion. Okay, so this was the first type of scenario. Second is, okay, transformative mediation. So, transformative mediation is focused on supporting and empowering the recognition shift by allowing, encouraging deliberation, decision making, perspective taking. A component transform micro focus on communication. Okay, don't confuse with this facilitative and transformative mediation. They have a difference between them. Transformative mediation, it is concerned with everything, not just communication. They are concerned with all micro focus on communication, identifying opportunities wherever they can, suit the discussion, wherever discussion can happen, wherever the conclusion can be found, and um, responding in ways that provide an opening for parties to choose what if anything to do with them. Okay, I'll explain you with the example, don't worry, it's not hard. Example is, a long standing family dispute over the inheritance of property arises. The family members have deeply rooted emotional issues, and the mediator focuses not just on resolving disputes but transforming the relationship between the parties, helping them understand each other's feeling and experiences. See, facilitative mediation was basically for communication, for providing a structure and agenda for discussion. Transformative is basically going micro depth in it. You are understanding the feelings, you are understanding the emotional issues. Okay, you are not just resolving the disputes, but you are transforming relationships. So the micro level causes and outcomes are resolved through transformative mediation. Okay, you will understand it from the question itself. Okay, here transforming relation, wherever it's written transforming, Transformative mediation, simple. So with the question only, you will get to know what type of mediation it is. Okay. Then you have a mediation with arbitration. So combination of mediation. Okay, we'll read from here only. Mediation has sometimes been utilized to good effect when it is coupled with arbitration, particularly binding arbitration in a process called mediation arbitration. The process begins with the standard mediation. Okay, so the process, it begins with the standard mediation. Everything happens as usual, but if mediation fails, that same mediator who was there, that person becomes the arbitrator, or you can say arbiter. This process is more appropriate in civil matters where rules of evidence or jurisdiction are not in dispute. Okay, all of this is given. Okay, now we'll see over here. Combination of mediation arbitration can create problems because mediation works best when the mediator is a neutral helper. The main essence of mediation is basically neutral third party. Whenever you say mediation, conciliation, we always repeat this word, neutral third party. Neutral, neutral. What is neutral? See, neutral is a person who is unbiased. Okay. uh, they are free to take decision. They are not biased on, they don't know both the parties facts and evidence or the issues. Okay, they are unbiased. So, okay, so mediation, it works best when the mediator is a neutral helper and has no power to force a decision. This makes party feel free to talk openly and honestly, right? Because the parties know that the mediator is neutral. He or she does not know what is happening with the parties, or he or she has not, has not evaluated the case before. So parties are very free to talk and share their opinions or whatever has happened openly. They don't bother about what they're sharing. They're free to share their opinions. But if that same mediator becomes an arbitrator later, the parties may not share everything or may change what they say because they fear it could affect the final decision. This is one of the biggest problems in when mediation is coupled with arbitration, because as you saw, if mediation fails, the mediator becomes arbitrator, who is the judge. So if the same mediator becomes the arbitrator or the judge, the parties may not share everything as they would if it is a normal mediation. Okay, they might not share everything, or they might change what they say, right? They might, they might twist from what they said because they fear it could affect the decision. So this spoils the fairness of mediation. What mediation is known for, neutral third party, that agenda is getting spoiled when mediation is combined with arbitration. So to avoid this, a different person should be appointed as arbitrator so that mediation process stays open and unbiased. We are not saying that mediation and arbitration cannot be coupled. It can be coupled, but the thing that is the main thing that is interrupting this is mediator becoming the arbitrator later. So instead of this, if mediation fails, arbitration can be adopted, but the arbitrator should be a separate person, not the mediator. Okay, so that the mediation process is open and unbiased. Okay, so this is what is there. Now the last type of mediation is online mediation. Again, online mediation, you basically solve mediation. It employs the online technology to provide disputants access to mediators, despite geographical distances, disability, or barriers to direct meeting. Everything is done online. That is online mediation. Okay, now you have process of mediation. Obviously, arbitration was the most lengthiest process that we have studied, in which we studied about notice, choose arbitrator, statement of claim, counterclaim, proceeding, award. That was the lengthiest. Mediation is not as lengthy. You just have 3 points over here. So, okay, starting off with this, the neutral third party facilitating process of mediation is known as mediator. Mediation does not follow uniform set of rules. Okay, they don't follow set of rules. They don't, you don't have a rule book according to which you have to work. But mediators usually they set their rules. They set forth rules that mediation will observe at the outset of the process. So though they don't have uniform set of rules, but usually mediators they set their own rules accordingly. Successful mediation often reflects not only in parties' willingness but to participate, but also mediator skills. Okay, so if a mediation is successful, it not only reflects that the party was willing to participate, but it also shows that what level of skills the mediator had. There is no uniform set of rules for mediators to become licensed. Okay, and the rules vary by state regarding requirement for mediator certification. So till now there is no set uniform set of rules for mediators to become licensed. Okay, but it varies from state to state. So, broadly speaking, mediation can be triggered in these three ways. The first way is that parties may agree to resolve their claims through a pre agreed mediation agreement. This is what we have already seen in arbitration also. Arbitration agreement, same way here, mediation agreement. You beforehand only decide that in future, if any dispute or differences happen, we will resolve it through mediation without initiating a formal court proceeding. Okay, pre litigation mediation is not governed in India. So in India till now, this pre-litigation mediation or mediation agreement, it is not yet governed. Second way, parties may agree to mediate at the beginning of the formal court proceeding. This is governed by Section 89 of Code of Civil Procedure 1908. So they may agree to mediate at the beginning of the formal court proceeding. Okay, and third is mediation can be taken recourse of after formal court proceeding have started, even after your formal court proceeding have started. If you feel that you can resolve your dispute through mediation, you can do that, or it can even happen post trial at the appellate stage. It can even happen post trial. Okay, so, okay, now under the Indian law, contractual disputes, including all of these, see, contractual disputes, including money related issues, relationship based issues, dispute needing ongoing relationships, consumer disputes, these disputes are best suited for mediation because it helps resolve disputes peacefully while maintaining relationship between the parties. Okay, so then they've given you example. You can just read through this. This is just example of mediation and how it can be solved. Okay. Now this is something that is important and it has come as a MCQ. Okay, so these specific type of issues, representative suits, election disputes, criminal offenses, case against special classes of person, these have been excluded from the scope of mediation. These cannot be solved by mediation. Okay, so, what was asked in your paper? Let me just read that to you. Okay, yeah, over here it was asked the Supreme Court of India in its judicial decision in Afcons Infrastructure Limited versus Chirian Varke Construction Company has expressly clarified the ambit of mediation. Who among the following falls within the purview of mediation? Falls within the purview of mediation. Okay, so options were representative suits, election disputes, criminal offenses, or cases involving international mercantile community. So the answer was option D. Okay, cases involving the international mercantile community. Okay, representative suits, election disputes, criminal offenses, all of these do not fall within the purview of mediation. Understood? So this is also okay. So with this we are done with mediation. What is mediation? Process of mediation, types of mediation. Okay, what falls within the purview of mediation, what doesn't fall under the purview of mediation, we've already seen all of this. Okay, now if you want, I will do these examples also so that you have a clear understanding. If you want to write examples, you can write that also. For example, a suburban homeowner might find that the formal legal system offers no realistic way to deal with neighbors' overly bright driveway lights that shine in his bedroom window. Such disputes, however, can be mediated. See, in a formal legal system, do you think there will be a solution to this problem? No, they will not be. They will just say go back. There is no solution to this. But mediation has a solution to this. Okay, they can be mediated. Mediation gives the participants the opportunity to raise and discuss any issues they might wish to settle. Okay, For example, it might turn out that the neighbor lit his driveway because the homeowner's dog went on his lawn, right? It can be because of that, or because the homeowner's tree was encroaching upon his property. Because mediation can handle any number of outstanding grips or issues, it offers a way to discuss the problem and what is the underlying problems underlying a dispute, and create a truly lasting peace. So all those things that do not come under the purview of your usual formal legal system, they can be mediated, they can be resolved through mediation. Okay, with this we are done with mediation, which is a type of ADR. Now the last we are going to see, it is conciliation. Okay, conciliation is also a type of ADR. Conciliation, it falls under part 3 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. Okay, again, conciliation means setting of disputes without litigation. When you don't follow a conventional court process and you settle the disputes without litigation, that is conciliation. Conciliation is a process by which discussion between parties are kept going through the participation of conciliator. Okay, so the neutral third party is known as a conciliator. Okay, conciliation is a process similar to mediation because the parties, out of their own free will, appoint a neutral third party to resolve the disputes. But they have a difference. Again, they have a difference. Conciliation and mediation have a major difference. The key difference between mediation and conciliation lies in the role of a neutral third party. A mediator merely performs a facilitative role and provides a platform for the parties to reach a mutually agreeable solution. The role of a conciliator goes beyond that of a mediator. A conciliator may be an interventionist in the sense that he or she may suggest potential solution to the parties to resolve the claims and disputes. If I have to make you understand this in short, a mediator for basically performs a facilitative role. Mediator will just give a platform, solve the disputes accordingly, according to what you agree. Okay, mediator will not give you solutions to solve that dispute. They just provide a platform. Just you have a platform, do whatever you want in that platform in an amicable, peaceful way. Now, what is the difference between that and a conciliator? Conciliator goes beyond, the role of conciliator goes beyond that of mediator, because a conciliator suggests potential solutions to the parties to solve the disputes. These are the situations you can solve your disputes in these ways. So, this is the main difference between mediation and conciliation. Okay, if the parties reach agreement on settlement of dispute, a written settlement agreement is drawn and signed by the parties. Okay, so if they agree, okay, we have reached to the conclusion of the disputes, we are going to settle the disputes in this manner. A settlement agreement is basically made by the parties and it is signed by the parties. If the parties request, the conciliator can also assist the parties in drawing the settlement agreement. The parties can request the conciliator, can you help us in making the agreement, settlement agreement? So the conciliator can also draw it for them. Okay, and this falls under section 73 clause 2 of the Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996. Okay, now when the parties have signed the settlement agreement, okay, conclusion, they have signed the settlement agreement, it becomes final and binding on the parties and person claiming under them respectively. So once that settlement agreement has been signed, it becomes final and binding. The settlement effect agreement has the same status and effect as that of a arbitral award. Okay, so it is treated as a degree of court and is enforceable. Okay, as seen in Harish Dayaram Thakur versus State of Maharashtra. Okay, so arbitration and conciliation, whatever result outcome is being achieved, it has a similar binding as that of a court judgment, similar decree of a court. But mediation is not having a similar binding as that of a court judgment. Remember this also. Okay, okay, conciliation is also governed by Section 89. Okay, this is just, they have just given you, how it is governed, and under which purview it falls. Section 89 of Code of Civil Procedure. All of this we have already seen. Um, then they've just given you example. Industrial Dispute Act 1947 provides for conciliation as a viable mean of resolving disputes in labor sector. This is the example you can write. Okay, now I will be giving you one question from the above topic that we have studied. I want you to write the answer for that in the comments down below. You don't need to explain me the full thing, just tell me which type of area it falls under. Okay, so the question is, okay, the question is, two companies manufacturing health drinks had a dispute over manufacturing techniques. They want to resort to alternative dispute resolution to solve their dispute rather than going for traditional litigation. Suggest the most suited mechanism. This is part 1. Part 2 is explain the procedure and compare the decision rendered under the suggested area mechanism and court order. Okay, so for this question, I just want you to give me the answer in few words. First, you just write what type of area this is. Then, for the procedure, I just want you to give me one, two words for it. Okay, you don't need to write full explanations, and you have to tell me whether it is binding as that of a court judgment or not. Okay, so please don't forget to solve this question in the comment down below. Okay, it will help you to understand if you have really understood the topics that I have explained you above or not. Now we are going on to the last segments of this chapter where we'll be seeing Lok Adalat, Lok Adalat, then we'll be talking about Ombudsman, and then lastly you have Lokpal and Lok Ayuta. Okay, so what is Lok Adalat? Usually this question comes directly, like if I say you, it comes in a, you can say a three marker. It comes as a three marker, so it can come as what is meant by Lok Adalat, highlight the benefits of Lok Adalat. So you should be knowing that what is Lok Adalat and what are the benefits. They have already listed you in points, so it is easy to learn. Okay, so what is Lok Adalat? Lok Adalat, it means people's court, and it is an innovative Indian contribution to global legal jurisprudence. The institution of Lok Adalat, as the name suggests, means people's court. Lok stands for people, Adalat means court. Okay, so India has a long tradition and history of these methods being practiced in the society at the grassroots level, at the lowest levels. In ancient times, disputes were referred to panchayats. Okay, I'm very sure you must have heard of this term panchayat. Okay, these panchayats were basically known as, in now time you say you call these as courts, but during that time the courts were known as panchayats at the village level. Okay, so in the village level for them courts were called panchayats. Panchayats used to resolve the dispute through arbitration. It proved to be very effective alternative to litigation. Okay, panchayat, they did not resolve dispute through litigation. They resolved dispute through arbitration, and it proved to be effective. Okay, so this concept of settlement of dispute through mediation, negotiation, or arbitral process is known as decision of Nyaya Panchayat. It is a conceptualized and institutionalized in the philosophy of Lok Adalat. Okay, so all of this is just the meaning, and how it is, what Lok Adalat means. So, okay, now you need to know that who are the people that comprise of Lok Adalat. Okay, this can come in the question as well as a separate question. Modern institution of Lok Adalat is presided by a sitting or retired judicial officer such as a chairman with usually two other member who is a lawyer and a social worker. So this is it. Okay, so it is presided by a sitting or retired judicial officer. Sitting means who is still working, or retired means who has stopped working. Judicial officer such as a chairman with two members, two other members, a social worker or a lawyer. Okay, social worker and a lawyer, not or and a lawyer. Okay, so okay, now benefits of Lok Adalat. Three benefits you have. First, that there is no court fee. Okay, second, there is no strict application of procedural laws. It is informal, you can say. The parties can directly interact with the judges. And third point is Lok Adalat is binding on the parties. Okay, it has the same degree of that of a court order. These are the three benefits of Lok Adalat: no court fee, no strict application of procedural laws, and the decision is binding. Next, we are going to see ombudsman. Ombudsman, just by reading this paragraph, you will understand. Ombudsman is an independent authority originally from Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian countries, you have Denmark, Norway, Sweden. Okay, so it is originated from Scandinavian countries and it acts as a representative to address public complaints and ensure fairness in administration. It investigates grievances, resolve dispute through recommendation or mediation, and identifies broader systematic issues which affect the people's rights and services. All right. Then in India, this role is performed by bodies such as your CVC, which is your Central Vigilance Commission, established on the recommendation of the Santanam Committee, and it promotes transparency, accountability, and vigilance in government functioning. So the two types of questions that can come from here, I'll just let you know. Just give me a minute. Okay, so the first type of question that usually comes is that under the recommendation of which committee was the Central Vigilance Commission set up? So you should know it is Santanam Committee. Next question that frequently, which is asked, very frequently asked, is that what is the purpose of establishing an ombudsman, and analyze the historical development of CVC in India. Purpose of establishing ombudsman, you will write the first part of this. Okay, and then for historical development of CVC, you will write all of this, that it was established on the recommendation of Santanam Committee. I will just read you out the answer that I have framed for this specific question. Okay, the answer that I have framed is ombudsman was originally derived from the Scandinavian countries and means representative. Ombudsmen are authority that help to resolve customer complaints and disputes by studying the general problems and issues of the society. They help to redress this in both public and private individuals. In India, such ombudsmen were made under the Chief Vigilance Commission under the recommendation of Santanam Committee. These ombudsmen help resolve banking and insurance related disputes as well as other public and private disputes. They are not under control of a legislature or executive. They aim to resolve grievances. Okay, so they are not under any pressure by the legislature or executive. Okay, so here in the last line you will see that they examine complaints outside the offending state institution, and they avoid the conflicts of interest inherent in self policing. Okay, policing. Okay, then this is what you have to write about ombudsman. If you write this much also, it will be enough. I'm just looking for more questions that I can tell you from this chapter specifically. This is the last topic of the chapter, Lokpal Lokayuta. Just give me a minute. Let me just see what other questions you can get from this chapter that have come in the paper. Okay, one more question from types of mediation. Identify the mediation where the mediators act like a guardians of the process, not the content or the outcome. The parties in dispute control what is discussed and how their issues are resolved. Mediator provides structure and agenda for discussion. This also I want you to write the answer in the comment box. Okay, I won't give you options because they're just barely, you have five types of mediation, what options you want in this. So I just want you to give me a one word answer in the comment down below. You will know that if you're understanding the topic. If you're not understanding it, or if you don't remember what I have done, you can pause the video in between. It's not necessary that you watch this as as a whole. See, my part is to provide quality lectures, so that is why I provide one shot, so that you have a one shot lecture in front of you if you have your exams, or if you're taking revision, if you're taking revision out of these videos. So I want you to get a one shot lecture so that you don't have to go here and there to provide to get the second or third part of the videos. That is why I provide you one shot. But see, my aim is to give you one shot quality lectures, but I am not forcing you to watch these videos in one go at all. And it is all according to you. If you understand better by watching it one shot, do it that ways. If you don't, then you study it in parts. do one listen to one part of the lecture, pause the video, do it by yourself, then go on with the rest of the video. Okay, so if you're not able to answer the questions that I'm telling you, go back to that part of lecture, see what I have told you again. I've and made you understand that in a very well manner. I have not cut short on anything, or I have not explained it in a quick manner so that you don't understand it. I'm teaching everything so that every person out here who is who is lacking the what you can say, like, is lacking the some part of that chapter, or is not able to understand that particular portion, can understand it from what I'm saying. So that is why I'm trying to provide the quality lectures for legal studies, because you do not get these lectures online quite often. You don't get this subject. And even, see, my first aim for making legal studies lectures were because you do not provide there are not a lot of lectures or legal studies online. That was my main aim why I wanted to start teaching legal studies, because I know there are a lot of people out there who, I'm not saying don't understand legal studies, but who might be they don't know a structure to learn that, who don't understand how they can remember everything in a chapter. That is why I try to provide lectures in such a way where I explain the concept in depth so that you're able to understand. So, as I already mentioned, if you're not able to understand a concept, pause it, understand it yourself, then go to the lecture and try to understand. I'm pretty sure it will help you. Okay, so for this question, I want you to give the answer in the comment down below. It will, the moment you type that answer and you post it, automatically you will remember that concept in your mind forever. Okay, any more question you have here? I already explained you Santhanam committee, all this I explained you. Then conciliation I explained you. Okay, there was one more question over here. Okay, it was a good question. It is a good question. For this, I'll tell you the answer only because it is an important question. I don't want you to make guessworks. Okay, the question was, Nita Industries Limited went through an arbitration process with Mira Limited to resolve a dispute over supply of raw materials. The arbitrator was a former CEO of Mitra Limited. Nita Industries Limited was not satisfied with arbitral award. What remedy is available to Nita Industries Limited? So here they're telling that Nita Industries Limited is not satisfied with arbitral award. What remedy is available? I will tell you all the four options. I will tell you the answer, but after telling you the options, please pause the video, think of the answer yourself. If you're able to answer it correctly, well and good. If you're not, I will explain you, no problem. Not at all the issue. You're revising this chapter only, so it is all right if you make mistakes. The first option is no remedy as the arbitral award is binding. Second option, Nita Industries Limited can file an appeal before the Supreme Court of India. Option C, Nita Industries Limited can ask for setting aside of a arbitral award. Option D, Nita Industries Limited has no reason to doubt the arbitrator, so it will have to accept the award. Please pause the video and try to answer it. Okay, so the answer for this is option A, no remedy as the arbitral award is binding. We have already seen this. It does not matter if you're satisfied with the award or not, because it has a similar binding as that of a court judgment. Even if you're not satisfied with it, you have no option because it has the similar degree of that of a court order. So the answer for this is option A. Okay, then other questions you can get is, okay, this question has come as a two marker. State the reasons for setting aside arbitral award. I've already explained this to you. It comes as a small paragraph in the end of the process of arbitration, setting aside of arbitral award. Then the question you can get is, okay, then the question is from this topic that we are yet to do, Lokpal Lokayuta. Okay, rest of the questions I have explained you already. Rest of the questions already explained you. CVC, all of this I've already explained you. Facilitative, transformative mediation, Lok Adalat and the benefits. Then, yeah, all of this I've already explained you. Okay, last topic of this chapter is Lokpal and Lokayuta. Okay, so Under this topic, the questions that you get is usually uh, the composition of Lokpal under the Lokpal and Lokayuta Act. This is the type of question you get. Okay, now what is Lokpal Lokayuta? Lokpal is known as the caretaker of people and it comes under the national level. Lokayuta is known as appointed by the people and it comes at the state level. Okay, so Lokayuta is similar anti-corruption ombudsman organization in Indian states. Lokayuta is a anti-corruption ombudsman organization in Indian states. One thing over here that you have to see is seeing the words ombudsman, don't write about ombudsman. Okay. If you see the word ombudsman, blindly don't start writing about ombudsman that we have already read over here. If it's saying anti-corruption ombudsman, you have to know that they're talking about Lokayuta. Okay, they are not talking about ombudsman. Okay, so blindly reading the question, don't frame the answer. Read the full question and then frame your answer. Okay, so institutions of Lokpal and Lokayuta were given formal recognition by passing Lokpal Lokayuta Act 2013, and the legislation it aims to combat the acts of bribery and corruption of public servant. Okay, their main aim is to control or curb bribery and corruption in the country, and the act applies to public servants in and outside India. The act includes within its purview even current and ex prime minister of India, except in matters pertaining to international relation, external internal security, public order, atomic energy and space. Okay, at least two-thirds of the members have to approve such inquiry. It further provides that such inquiry has to be held in camera, and if the Lokpal comes to conclusion that complainant deserves to be dismissed, the records of the inquiry shall not be published. So, if the conclusion is that under whoever the complaint has been registered, that person has to be dismissed, means nothing is being done against that person, then whatever records of inquiry has been made, it shall not be published or made available to anyone. Okay, then it cannot be made published because that person deserves to be dismissed. Okay, besides the Prime Minister, it brings within its purview any person who has been the Minister of Union or any person who has been the member of either house of the Parliament. Okay, so the Lokpal shall not inquire into any matters involved in or arising from or connected with allegation of corruption against any member of either House of Parliament in respect to anything said or vote given by him. So if any allegation is there, suppose in future allegation of corruption is there against any person from member of either house of parliament with respect to anything that he or she has said, or any vote that is given, the Lokpal cannot inquire in those matters as under clause 2 of the article 105 of the constitution. Article 105 of constitution deals with powers and privileges, immunities to the parliament and its members. It gives members freedom of speech in parliament and protects them from legal action for anything said or done inside the house. If you come under the purview as a member of either house of parliament, you cannot be held responsible for anything that you have said or any vote that you have given. Okay, okay, these are the people who come under the Lokpal Act. So this was what the question was saying, that what is the composition of Lokpal under Lokpal Lokayuta Act. So the composition as under under Lokpal Lokayuta Act 2013 is as follows. It is constituted by a chairperson who is usually the chief justice or a judge in the Supreme Court, okay, or a person with impeccable and exceptional expertise, outstanding ability, who constitutes eminent knowledge for not less than 25 years in the field of public policy, administration, anti-corruption administration, finance, vigilance, etc. Lokpal consists of further total members of Lokpal should not exceed 8. It should be 8, it cannot exceed 8, it cannot become 9, it has to be 8 only. Okay, out of which 50% shall be judicial members. Okay. Then over here they're talking about how the powers of Lokpal are equivalent to those of CVC in India, right? We saw CVC. Okay, so these are what this is what basically Lokpal Lokayuta was, and likewise Lokpal Lokayuta Act 2013 provides for establishment of Lokayuta in every state. Okay, and all states should institute Lokayutas from 1 year from the date of commencement of the Lokpal Lokayuta Act. Okay, and yeah, then they've given certain states in India who had enacted this act, who had, even before the enactment of this act, they had Lokayutas. Okay, Delhi, Karnataka, Kerala, even before this act was enacted, they had institutions of Lokayuta. Okay, and Maharashtra was the first state to introduce institution of Lokayuta in 1971. With this we come to end of this chapter. Conclusion part, usually they don't ask in exam, just go through it. It is just a you can say summary of the chapter, why ADR was introduced, what was its benefits, uske bare mein hi they talk about that only in the conclusion. Okay, now if you want to practice this chapter in a so that you completely understand it, first you need to have a thorough reading of the chapter. You need to remember the points under this chapter. You need to completely know what point is coming under what. You cannot mix definitions, you cannot forget points. Important keywords should be written. And then, as I have already given you two questions which I expect you to write brief answers in the comment box. I don't want you to write stories, just 1 to 2 words is enough. And then if you want thorough understanding of the chapter, I would recommend that you complete all these exercise questions. 7 questions you have in the exercise. Complete these questions so that you know, at least if you're not writing and doing, at least read the question and try answering it verbally, so that you understand that if you have understood the chapter or where you're lagging, where you have to improvise. Okay, with this we are done with the chapter. Unit 2, alternative dispute resolution, ADR. Okay, I have explained you everything in this chapter in a proper manner, structural manner, and I have tried my best so that you have gone through all this and you have underlined whatever I have done. If you're not understanding a particular topic, please pause the video and try to understand it yourself. Then replay the video and understand it. And hopefully, all the questions that I have told you, which are important, I have covered them properly. In the next video, we'll be doing the next following chapters from Unit 3. So, I'll be completing Unit 3 also. In Unit 3 comprises of 4 chapters. I'll be completing that also before in the following week. I'll be doing that as well, don't worry on that part. But for the timing, I want you to do this chapter in a well off manner. This is one of the largest chapters that is there in this textbook as of now. So if you understand this chapter, the rest of the chapters will be comparatively easier. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that I tried to make learning easier from my part. I tried to make it more understandable. I tried to reduce the complexity of the chapter that is given. I hope you understood whatever I have explained, and if you did, please um, do the homework questions so that you don't forget the chapter. And if you like this video, please don't forget to share it with other people so that they get to know about this channel. And don't stop supporting me, and please like this video and share it. Thank you so much, and please don't forget to complete the homework. I'll be back with another video.